Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's Lessons of Vietnam. My name is Bill Dixon. I'll be your host tonight. We're broadcasting from the international headquarters of Nissan Communications here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And tonight's show will be the engineers in Vietnam. Before we start on that, I want to tell you about a couple of shows we got coming up that I think you might be very interested in. The next show, which is May 25th, we're having a special guest here in the studio. Her name is Barbara Abernathy. Met Barbara some years ago when Bob Matthews started the Lessons of Vietnam course at Enloe High School, the charter course there, which now all over the country. It was in the paper what was going on, and Barbara Abernathy came to Bob and asked if it was okay for her to sit in on the classes. Barbara's story was that she was engaged to a young man, and they were getting ready to get married, but they decided to wait until Donald came home. Donald never came home. Sometime later, NCBI and Bob took some people back to Vietnam, and Barbara went with them, and she found the place that Donald was lost his life and had some closure. But since then, she has gone back to Vietnam. She fell in love with the people there. She goes back to Vietnam on a regular basis. She has a young lady now from Vietnamese ancestry that she is sending to college that she looks after. She was due to go back to Vietnam a couple months ago, but because of some family health situations, she neglected to go, but she'll be going again sometime in June. So we're going to have her May 25th to come on and tell you her story. It's quite a heart-wrenching story, but I think you'll enjoy listening to her story. The next time after that will be June 8th. We're having our guests be by Skype. They are Tony and Janet Seahorn. Tony was an officer who served in Vietnam. His first week in Vietnam, he was in a hooch or barracks with three other lieutenants. They were rocketed, and he's the only one that survived. He was later wounded again, but he came home, and they discovered he was suffering from post-traumatic stress, and they got together. He and his wife got together and wrote a book, and this is the book they wrote, The Tears of a Warrior. If you are got post-traumatic stress, have a loved one in your family who has post-traumatic stress, or you want more information about post-traumatic stress, this is the book you need to read, or tune in for their show. They're fantastic. I've read the book. I've seen some TED Talks that she's done. So that is June 8th. Two absolutely fantastic shows that you might want to put on your calendar. Excuse me. What I want to start out tonight with, as I mentioned, we're going to do the engineers in Vietnam. You know, we had a war come along, and it's kind of like, oh, we're going to have a war? That means we're going to have to send troops. Excuse me, again, got a frog in there. We're going to send troops. Well, we've got to have some support for those troops. So we need to have some engineering, because somebody's got to build some buildings and so forth. And the combat troops going in need support, and those people who were supporting the combat troops needed support. But you had three major problems: who you were going to send, how you going to get them there, how you going to get the materials there, and if there's no port, how are you going to get it in the country? That was the challenge. How do you send all these men and all this material to the other side of the world? Now we're going to go ahead to the next slide, if you would. Okay. So we had these buildup of troops, but it just they didn't exactly know what they were going to do, because in 1963, as I mentioned in just a minute, they were thinking about, well, the war will probably be over in 65 for us sending people there, so they kind of hesitated to send military troops there. So what they did was they sent in civilian contractors. I'm trying to remember some of the names of the companies that were going in. RMK, BRJ, some of the big companies, they went in and did it. But before that, the original, the South Vietnamese government and their infrastructure could not handle the sudden influx of American soldiers coming in and their needs and so forth. Because prior to 1962, all work done in Vietnam basically were done by CBs and a few small units like that. But in 1962, the head of the Military Assistance Command in Saigon requested that the United States Army negotiate contracts with civilian contractors. Now, because the CBs and so forth couldn't keep up, so they were going to bring in and start having different contracts with these builders they had in there, construction companies. But the only problem was that these construction companies were already starting to back down, get rid of their personnel, and sending some of the people back home because, as I mentioned before, they were expecting that by 1965 we'll be packing up and coming home as far as supporting the Vietnamese people. So they were caught off guard, and they had to bring people back and so forth. And because there were no other units in Vietnam except them, they had to rehire people, bring people back and so forth. So what they did was they made it a little bit better. They started working on some of the ports. They actually, because materials was a problem, they started to stockpile materials in Saigon. Well, let's go back to the military. The Army and Department of Defense were trying to decide whether they were going to send military troops in. And as you can see from the sign there was a lot of confusion, unsure, unclear, perplexed, disoriented, bewildered, and lost of what they were going to do. Because should they send troops in to support the troops, construction troops, or what should they do? Let the civilian companies do it. It was kind of a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation, and the powers that be never passed the word down exactly what was going to be. But they started sending in new construction equipment and so forth. Now, after May of 1965, they decided to start sending in some American troops. And in 1965, the headquarters of the 35th Engineer Group construction was at Fort Polk, Louisiana. They were alerted for deployment. Now, assigned to the 35th group was the 46 engineers and the 168th engineers in a maintenance company. So they were getting all of them ready to ship out to Vietnam. However, when the 35th group went, they didn't take the 46 or the 168 with them. Instead of them, orders came down for the 864th Engineer Battalion in construction from Fort Walton, Texas, and the 84th Engineers construction from Fort Ord, California were selected to go with the 35th. So the companies they had getting ready was bypassed. Now, when you start sending a military unit like this overseas, first of all, engineers are soldiers first. But you don't send troops over to build buildings and build ports and build roads and build all the stuff that you got to have people that are construction oriented. The problem was that when they got these units and said, okay, we're going to send you over, there was a personnel problem. Because if you were less than 6 months left in the military in your service, they couldn't send you. Because by the time you got there, it'd be time to come home. And if you were promised being transferred to another unit, they couldn't send you. So they had to go out and find all new people just about. To give you an example, 30% of all the officers did not qualify. 66% of all warrant officers didn't qualify, and 23% of the enlisted men had to be replaced. Now, that's a big deal when you start replacing all these people, because you just can't pull from other units and going, okay, I'm going to take this guy and we'll teach him how to climb a piece of steel or pave a road or whatever. You had to have people that had some training. So getting them all put together was a challenge to itself. But during the year of 1965, the engineer units grew from 100 to over 7,000 personnel. Now, that's a lot of growth in a year with the engineers and so forth. The first engineer group to arrive in Vietnam was the 7th Engineer Battalion, along with the 937th Engineer Group, and they were headquarters in the coastal city of Quy Nhon. Now, the geography of Vietnam and its shape, the geography has mountains. Now, this is South Vietnam only we're talking about. It has mountains, it has the foothills, it had the plains, and then it had the swamp. So they had to divide Vietnam up into different segments because it was the geography, the people, the weather all changed so much. It's a long, narrow country, not very wide in places, but it is very long. So they had divided up into 4 corps. Right up at the DMZ, the demarcation line between North Vietnam and South Vietnam was I Corps. The Central Highlands area, or the foothills, was 2 corps, and around Saigon was 3 corps, and then south of Saigon was 4 corps. And what they did was they put 3 corps and 4 corps together because around Saigon you had starting to get swamps, and of course 4 corps was the breadbasket of Vietnam because that's where all the rice paddies were and swamps and so forth. So, but that's how they grouped them up. Now, the lack of port facilities was a real challenge because as they were sending in engineers, they were also sending in combat troops. If you think about the 1st Cavalry Division, if you saw the movie, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, the 1st Cavalry going in, well, the 1st Cavalry came in about the same time as the 19th Engineer Battalion came in. So they had to get the combat soldiers settled in first and then worry about the engineering and so forth. A lot of the ships for the materials for the engineers was kept offshore of Vietnam for weeks at a time. So even if they did have enough materials to get started, quite often when they got started, the job had to be set down or shut down because the materials were still out on the ships and so forth and couldn't get into ports. So that was always a challenge too. And in June of 1965, when it was announced there would be a substantial troop deployment to Southeast Asia, within a month, that announcement orders went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to the 18th Engineer Headquarters. Now, they had disbanded pretty much up until that time from World War II or Korea, but they got orders to prepare to ship out to Vietnam. And a month later, they shipped out for Vietnam, which they also had the same problems with as far as personnel, but they got out within a month. What they did was they stole a lot of people from the 20th Engineer Brigade, 159 Engineer Group. Now, the 159 Engineer Group headquarters is where I was stationed at Long Binh. And on 30th of September, the 159 Group was assigned control of non-divisional operations in 3 and 4 Corps. So we were assigned to from Saigon on down. The next picture is the headquarters. It looks like it's probably early 65, 66, the headquarters of the 159 Group. If you see that telephone pole right about the middle there, my office was on the other side of that telephone pole later, but by the time I got there was sandbags all the way around the buildings, and there was a road and sandbags at the road. We used to sit out on the sandbags out by the road here and watch Binh got hit every night. But this was the original headquarters of the 159 Group, and it really got really nice when it rained there. The first project of the 46 engineers, which was later reassigned to the 159 Group, they were reassigned with 3 battalions and a couple of companies. And if I remember correctly, the 46 was one, the 96 was one, and the 168th or 169th was one, and it had a couple other companies. But this is the 9030 VAC Hospital there in Long Binh. It's a 400-bed hospital, and you can see the constant huts they used was like a series of X's there. And the next picture is the revetments from it. Those things were full of sand and so forth to protect the hospital from mortar rounds and shrapnel and so forth and coming in. I took that picture. The other picture was taken before my time. But this is the entrance to the 9030 VAC Hospital there at Long Binh, which was right up the road from LBJ, or Long Binh Jail. If you see those barrels up on top of the scaffolding there, that's where they got their hot water from and their water. Now, the 159 engineer group, I can't speak for all the other engineer groups there, but the 159 engineer group had pretty big array. We had our own concrete plant. You can see that from the office. We had our own asphalt plant, and if there won't smoke coming out of that asphalt plant every day, there was a major I worked for there was on the phone chewing somebody out, wanting to know why the asphalt plant wasn't working. We had all sorts of heavy equipment that you would ever think about having heavy equipment for everything, cranes, road graders, and so forth. We had, I don't know how many dump trucks we had, but we had a bunch. We had our own surveying unit. We had our own design and engineering department, which is what I was in. Now, one of the strangest pieces of equipment we had, I never saw one other than this one, and never heard, and have only found a few people that ever saw one of these. This is called a jungle crusher. To be exact, it's called a La Tournée tree crusher. Now, this thing weighed 60 tons. So you didn't put it up on the back of a truck and carry it too many places. Now, this picture that you're seeing here, obviously it's during the monsoon seasons because you can see the mud and the water there. But actually, when it went over the trees, if you look carefully, you can see to the right-hand side, there's a truck sitting there, and you can kind of get an idea how big that steel wheel is. It's enormous. You didn't move it a whole lot, so you had to kind of leave it. So it was kind of hard to use it a whole lot. They actually did not buy this. They leased it from a company out of France, and they used it in the Long Binh area for about a year, and then they just kind of scrapped it. Because, like I said, you didn't move it around a whole lot. It's 60 tons, big. So when they won't use it, it would just sit out in the jungle, which is the bad guys and all kinds of things that would happen to it. So that's the jungle crusher. And I have actually found a couple of people that ran that over the years. The next picture here, the Saigon River, which was between Saigon and right outside of Saigon and Long Binh, had this bridge. It's called the Newport Bridge. And one of the things that the Newport Bridge would do, it was the main entrance from number 1 into Saigon from Long Binh and every place like that. And this particular day, you can see where the sappers came in, but they only blew up like 2 lanes there, and the traffic's still going over, tanks still going over, and so forth. But they did a thing. Now, I want to stop right here just a moment. The next slide may be very disturbing for some people, but it's part of the story I wanted to tell. So you might want to kind of take a break or look the other way or whatever, because the next picture is kind of graphic, but it's part of the story I wanted to tell you about blowing up the Newport Bridge. Okay, let's go ahead and go to it. You've been warned. These are 3 of the sappers that blew up the bridge. Now, what they did was they took these guys and pulled their pants down, laid them alongside the road, and I can tell you, in that heat and humidity of Vietnam, it didn't take long for them to swell up, and just unbelievable. And they were left there for 3 days. Now, the idea was, if you blow up our bridge, this is what we're going to do to you. As I mentioned a while ago, this was actually done by the ARVNs, the South Vietnamese troops, but even the engineers are soldiers first and then construction second. So no matter where they are, they always have to be ready for be a soldier in battle as well as doing their construction work. So we were just going to skip.
Barbed wire?
That is concertina wire. Kind of rolls up there. It's kind of hard to get in unless you're a Viet Cong sapper who's been trained to crawl through that stuff. And this another picture of the bridge there. This is looking back towards Long Binh, and if you can see how the bridge was put together pretty ingeniously. If you look where the bridge is on the side there, you can see cables coming out. What it still is concrete beams with cables running through it. So all you got to do is replace those beams. Of course, there you got to have another piling there, but you replace those concrete beams and pour asphalt on it. In the next picture, they already had some already made ready. This is the tractor. This is the truck bringing in the beams like they were blown up at the bridge there. This is replacing the bridge, and so they had some of them standing by. So the bridge wasn't shut down very long at all. Now, we also had our own engineers. They were somewhat characters in themselves. I think each one of these guys drank a case of beer each every night, going out and sweat it out the next day. I've been trying to rack my brain to remember this guy's name. He was really a nice guy. They would, when I was back in the office, they'd bring me their engineering notes, and I'd have to draw maps or roads and so forth from what they did. But here he is doing, in the background you see some elephant grass and so forth. This area's been kind of cleaned out a little bit there. The next picture is us out getting ready to survey for a road. If you notice the young man in front there, he's from Hawaii, obviously, and of course his name was Pineapple. And you can see that 100-foot tape hanging from his belt there, which was basically useless because it's hard to pull a straight line measurement when there is no straight line. Behind him is a young man from South Georgia. I'm going to leave it at that. And then behind him is some of the 9th Infantry guys that we went out with. But we're out trying to survey a road, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. This next picture, looking back on it now, it's kind of funny. The surveyors and the 9th Infantry guys, we were coming across this rice paddy dike, and the water buffaloes were crossing it. And we stopped right where I took this picture. And I don't know what that smoke is in the background. It may be somebody burning crap. I don't know. But we stopped right there because every time we try to make a step forward, that water buffalo would start hitting the ground with his hoofs, pawing the ground and tossing his head like he was going to charge us. So we stood there, and he stood there, and we stood there. And it got kind of funny. Here we are, heavily armed American soldiers out in the middle of a rice paddy dike, stood down by a water buffalo. But we didn't want to shoot the water buffalo because you get in deep trouble there. So we got trying to figure out what we were going to do. And this little girl came along, and she was really a small little girl. She was probably wasn't more 4 and 5 years old. But she passed us by, kind of gave us a weird look. And she went up there to that water buffalo and slapped him across the nose and told him to go away. And he run on off so we could get by. And here we were, highly trained combat troops. Sit down, we saved by a 4 or 5 year old little girl. Now, everybody said that, you know, engineers were back in the rear with the gear. Well, sometimes being in the rear with the gear was not the place to be. This was a nice replacement where you first came in. As you can see, that place back in the rear where it was safe got hit by a 22mm rocket there. The next picture, the South Vietnamese engineers were a little slower than us. They were a little bit farther behind. You can see how they're getting their rocks crushed, ready to pave a road or whatever they're going to do there. Now, I took this picture because it was right outside of Long Binh. It was also one of my favorite pictures. As you can see there at the sign, it says littering is prohibited, and that is a fairly clean spot. But you see the buses, there's a Shell oil truck there, the Lambretta. Now, that Lambretta holds 14 Vietnamese or 4 really friendly Americans. And to the left of that is a gas station. You can see the Mama San and I can't tell whether that's a Papa San and Mama San there to the left of the picture there. That's a gas station. And then the one over here that's got wood up on it, kind of an A there, that's probably a Circle K or something like that. It probably got some food or Coke in there and so forth. Triangle K, yes. And you can see some Cokes right there at the Mama San right there by the sign with her hat on. And you can see the guy putting baggage and stuff up on top of the bus. But that's right there at the intersection of Highway 9 and number 1 right there at the corner of Long Binh, right up from used to be headquarters. You can see it up on the hill. Now, wherever we go, we always brought a crowd of kids around. And the kids always stood around and watched what we were doing. And basically, they're waiting for you to give them some cigarettes or some sea rations or some chocolate or whatever they could either beg from you or steal from you. They had to survive the best way they could. So that's some of the kids. Now, this picture is of, for lack of knowing exactly what it's called, I'm going to call it a tank bridge. That is a bridge on the back, on top of a tracks or like a tank. Now, this is actually crossing the Newport Bridge. When I took this picture, that section had been blown out of. You can see the bridge was pretty good size anyway. But sometimes whenever they blew a small bridge or whatever, we would have to go in and repair it and so forth and investigate it. And you can see the next picture, there's that bridge open up off that tank there. It opens up and you can see traffic going across the bridge there. So we didn't slow it down a whole lot. The next picture, if you notice Papa San there in his black pajamas, I know that when I was going through basic training, my sergeant told me that my first day in Vietnam, a short guy in black pajamas was going to blow my sorry blanket to blanket. And most everybody in Vietnam wore black pajamas like that. And you can see a motorcycle going across that tank bridge, and there's an umbrella that's fairly loaded down, getting ready to go across. Now, I'm not certain now, I remember whether that panel was wide enough for him to get across tonight. I believe it was, as long as he didn't sneeze or anything. I don't think there was a whole lot of extra to get by there. And the next picture,
it has one wheel in the front.
yeah, and two in the back.
You can
yeah,
take both.
yeah. So he couldn't split it.
Yeah.
But he had to go on one panel, and it was not a whole lot of extra room. So if he sneezed or whatever, he would run off. This is the tank without the bridge. This is what it looked like with the palm trees and so forth in the background. Now, to give you an idea, this is a nice old Ford. I don't know what year this Ford was. And if you look real carefully, you can see the photographer also did a lot of, I probably did the first selfies. If you look in that rear view mirror, you see the photographer taking pictures. I kind of got the selfie thing started, I guess, and there's an umbrella there, but they're getting ready to go across the bridge. And there's an old DeSoto truck getting ready to go across the bridge and so forth. And, some of you younger kids probably never heard of a DeSoto. Now, here's a Ford bus going across the bridge. Now, if you look at these guys up on top, you rode wherever you had a chance. Now, I always thought that the guys up on top probably had a better position, because if you ran over a landmine, you were probably much better off up there. Of course, you did get a few bugs in your teeth than you were inside. Now, again, if you look at the photographer, did another selfie there in the rear view mirror. As the bus is getting ready to go across. And the next picture is a bus. Now, look at this picture very carefully and tell me what you see that looks a little strange or different. If you notice, nobody's sitting on the seats. If you notice, you can see everybody is sitting in their knees. They were squatting on the seats. Now, I'm not certain whether they were squatting on the seats because they squat everywhere anyway and don't sit in chairs much, or the fact that on these buses they carried their chickens, their goats, their pigs, and everything else that maybe you didn't want to sit on the seats. But anyway, they did squat and sit on the seats, but there's Papa San looking out to watch across the bridge. The next one is, here's a guy paving road, as you can, how we pave road, just like a road paver here, except normally here you don't see a guy with an M14 slung under his seat. If you look under the paver, the guy on the paver's seat there, his rifle is slung up under him because, like I said before, he's a combat troop first. But here we are they've cleared the jungle back a little bit and paving the road. We paved a lot of road in Vietnam because they were most of them passed when we got there. And next one is Mama San riding her bicycle down after a deuce and a half with its diesel going by. This is a freshly paved road that we're still working on there. She's not too happy about the asphalt that she's running through because it's probably getting all over her tires, and the fact that that diesel truck went by and kind of too. Now this one is a picture of the asphalt plant where we kept our asphalt for the roads. And if you look down to the bottom on the left there, about kind of in the middle, that's called a sheep's foot. And when you dig up something and you put dirt back in, this helps pack it back in. So that's how you compact the ground for, if you're going to put a road or so forth on it, you run a sheep's foot over it back and forwards. It's pretty heavy and it compacts and makes the road hard, or the surface that you're going to use very hard. Now the next picture, this is United States Army Republic of Vietnam headquarters there at Long Binh. Now they told me that these flagpoles were $35,000 a piece. And there's Papa San sweeping the road. And this was the headquarters right there at on Long Binh. It's set up on a hill. Now I can never remember this place being hit, and I can't imagine it was sitting up. It was 2-story, green buildings, air conditioning on it. You could hang meat in it and keep it from spoiling. But this used to be headquarters, and we had a lot of general officers and colonels and other big big guys in that place. So they, sometime I'll show you pictures of do a series on the Long Binh itself, but well there. So they had it to have, in case they ever did get hit, somebody there decided they needed a big underground bunker. So if you notice the next picture here, there's our bulldozers digging a deep hole to put a bunker in, right next to the used to be headquarters. Now, to kind of get an idea of how deep that bunker was, if you look at the next slide here, the bulldozer's in the hole, but you can't see him. All you can see is smoke. But in the background is the used to be headquarters building, some of the trucks and so forth, digging it out to get ready to build the bunker. The next one, you can see, kind of give you an idea of how thick that floor is right there. Look at that Jeep and compare it to the floor. I believe the floors were about 4 foot thick, the walls about 4 foot thick, and the roof was about 4 foot thick. But what you see there is the ramp going up from the underground bunker when it's built up to the surface, where the all the officers could go down in that ramp to get out of harm's way and so forth, and steel beams and so forth. So that's starting the construction of the bunker. And there's a picture of the ramp going up again, and you can see all the rebars and so forth in there. And the next picture, you can see some of the ceiling they're pouring. The first pour there, and then you can got the rebars. And if you kind of get a little idea of the guy's arm that's standing back there and look at the rebars, you can kind of get the idea that the rebars were probably close to the size of his arm. And I can't imagine tying all those rebars. Somewhere along in this process, if I remember correctly, some of the concrete didn't set up like it was supposed to. It was tested just like it is here. So they had to tear all of it out, rebars, concrete, and everything, and re-pour, which was, I imagine somebody got some deep doo-doo over that. But that's pouring the roof and so forth. Now this is the tunnel going down in. You can see the rebars and the thickness of the walls and so forth. They put plywood over so they could work over the top of the tunnel without getting dirt and so forth in it. And there's they worked at nights, so they had lights out there, but again you can see the rebars and so forth. Now that's in the floor. You can imagine what it was in the ceiling. I don't know what they expect somebody was going to come up from the bottom like there, but and there's some of the columns and so forth inside building that. Now I've always wondered what they did with this bunker. When I went back to Vietnam, I went to Long Binh, and Long Binh is a huge industrial complex now, and I still believe they probably got this bunker they're using there for some reason. And there's the guys in their hard hats getting off getting off the day for go to lunch or something, or go to dinner or whatever they're getting ready to do. And you can see some of Long Binh in the background there, but they're walking up the ramp. You can see all those rebars and so forth. There's no telling how much steel was actually in that place with the steel I-beams and so forth like that, plus the rebars. So the engineers and again, there's another picture of the rebars and the concrete. You can see that with the buildings in the background. And there I am checking it out. That's the entrance to the tunnel. I don't remember going back, but I'm certain they put steel doors over that entrance right there to keep people out. But that's where you went down the ramp right there. And I'm a spec 4 there, okay. All right, and the next one is my 159 Engineer Group built the largest engineer-built bridge in Vietnam. It was located, and I cannot remember the river. That river was there, but it was right next to the Arvin Engineering School. That was the Army Republic of Vietnam Engineering School. Now, as you can see from this next picture, it went all the way across the river, and there was nothing on the other side. There wasn't a road or anything at the time, so they had to put a road in too. Now they're pouring concrete there and so forth, building it. And the next picture, you can see the bunker. Get ahead of me. You can see the bunker there from back one. There you go. You can see that bunker with guards and so forth in it, because always somebody had to be on duty watching it. Excuse me again. Now, I'm not certain exactly what that fire is back there. I can tell you what it looks like. It looks like barrels of crap being burned, but I'm not certain. But that's the where the bridge is working on. And I want to tell you a little bit about this bridge real quick. They did a great job of building a bridge, but an I-beam, think of an I, and in an I-beam like that, you put in, because you got that single eye and you got the top pieces like that, well, the I-beam has a tendency to want to do this, okay? Especially if you got large weight going across. Well, the general's coming for the official opening, going to cut the ribbon and so forth and let a series of tanks and so forth go out. So they didn't have time to put these stiffeners in. So as the tanks were going over, the bridge started doing this number, and luckily everybody got across and they went back and put the stiffeners in because there wouldn't have been much of a bridge after that. So sometimes to make it look good for the officers, things kind of got left by the wayside and so forth. Now this next picture was, we have a movie theater. It was an outdoor theater, and during the monsoon season it was kind of hard to see much of anything. So this is a theater we were building for ourselves there at Long Binh at the 159 group, which was all the other the battalions, 46th, 169th, 96, and all that came and used our facilities there. But that was the facilities. We had movies there just about every night. Now, how current the movies were not very current, and some of them were, I won't say they were silent, but they were just about as old as that. Now, the next one is also an experience. They decided they needed a road, and we're going out surveying the road, and you can see where the bulldozers come down and cut down this hill a little bit, because we're in the edge of the mountains there. That is a tough hill to climb, too. But here we are cutting in this new road. Now, as I mentioned a while ago, when the surveyors, we were trying to put this road in. And the idea was we would take this road, this side of the road, we would survey it and clear it with a bulldozer up to the river. Then we would go around to the other side and start the jungle and clear it back to the river. Now, here we are in Vietnam. We have helicopters everywhere. You would think that a helicopter could fly over and go, this is where you stop, this is where you need to be on the other side. But that never happened. We came back from the other side, and we must have cleared half the jungle in Vietnam trying to find that same spot was that we had stopped at on the other side. See, the most dangerous thing in Vietnam was a second lieutenant, a map, and a compass. Because the lieutenant we had in charge of us doing this could not find his way back to that spot while I was going out. Now, later they did because they built the road. So the next, and as you can see, there's going through some of the jungle. And if you notice the water standing there, there were places that you could walk all day long and never actually touch ground. You were actually walking on roots of the plants and so forth. We got an armored personnel carrier stuck out there one day, and the lieutenant got in deep doo-doo for that one too. But there we are, that's another part of the road. Now, also you had to look out for extra items or leftovers. Sometimes there was a battle there earlier, or because a lot of times we put bomb craters that you would not believe how big and deep they were. And then sometimes you'd see these flutter bombs. They drop out a big arm and they just kind of flutter down. It was aluminum fins on the back, and it just kind of fluttered down. And sometimes they didn't explode. So you had to be real careful where you were going that you didn't step on one, or the bad guys had picked up one and made it into a booby trap. But they were kind of laying around out there in the jungle left over. Now, this next picture, I kind of laugh at this one too. You see an armored personnel carrier, and to the right of that is a huge bamboo thicket. Well, the lieutenant we were working with, he decided he was tired of walking. So he got the driver of the bulldozer off, and he started driving the bulldozer. Well, he drove the bulldozer into this thicket, and as he drove it in, it just kind of closed in behind him. And if you ever seen bamboo, it's sharp as all get out. It'll cut you all up. Well, he got in there and started getting cut up. So then he just stopped the bulldozer and turned it off and started hollering for help. And we had to go in there with machetes to cut the dumb idiot out so he could get back. And then he decided he didn't want to drive the bulldozer as much as he did before. But you can see it's a little muddy through there. But that's the bamboo thickets, and I really think the guys on the armored personnel carrier there was part of the 9th Infantry that was out with us. I think we'd have voted. We'd all left him there at that time because he was, he was an engineer. He was a lieutenant, a second lieutenant with a map and a compass. The next picture is basically the chapel we built for ourselves, and we built all over Vietnam. The chapel, non-denomination chapel, and so forth, with I-beams and wood laminate beams and so forth. Now, the next picture, I don't know exactly why I had this picture taken of me. I was a private PFC there, actually a private there, but this is not my desk there. But it's in the room that I sit in. The room that I had to sit in there was air conditioning. It was the only air conditioning anywhere around, because if you're doing drafting and you're doing work on drafting boards and so forth, and you're sweating it, you stick to it, it really messes up the drawings. But that's the engineering office there. We did a little bit of everything. One of my first jobs was make charts for the briefings for the generals. We had colonels everywhere, and we had to have charts every day to brief the general on how much asphalt we'd laid down, how much concrete we had done, all the different things we had done. And I had charts that had charts. And that's one of the reasons I started volunteering to go out with the guys, just to get out of making charts, because it got real old real quick. But that was a little while. That room right there was probably, it was probably 8 feet wide and about 15 feet long, looking out. And I could look out from that desk right there. I could look out and see my full bird colonel in his office through his window, and he didn't have an air conditioning. The next picture, this was my desk while I was back in the base at Long Binh and not out in the field taking pictures of myself. But this is you can see my wife's picture hanging over by the calendar. If you notice on the calendar, I was marking off the days. Not that I was trying to figure out when I was going to get short or whatever, but that's, I did a lot of maps, I did a lot of buildings and so forth while I was there. Now, to give you a little bit of a contrast, this was my boss. He never left the company area. He got up in the morning, he went to breakfast, he went to work in the office. At lunchtime, he came out of the office, went to the mess hall, ate lunch, went back to the office, worked his 12-hour shift, just like we all did. And that night, he would come out of the office, go to the mess hall and have dinner, and he'd go back to the barracks, and he probably never left the barracks. He spent an entire year never leaving the company area. I can't imagine going to some place like that and just never leaving an area as small as that company area was you saw a while ago. But he never went, and he might have gone down and walked the 50 feet over to the movie theater to see a movie or so forth. But there is in the tennis shoes. We tried to get out of uniform as soon as we could. That's his foot locker behind him. And it looks like a laundry bag there, or a duffel bag for Mama Son to get the laundry and so forth. Now, the next picture, as you can see, some of us went out in the jungle. You won't believe just how good that water felt out there, and I'm filling up my canteen with water there, and that's a story into itself. And if you remember looking at me when I first started this show and looking at this picture, you can see I have changed a little bit. I did wear the Army glasses back then. The problem was with Army glasses and the helmet, if you tried to run, you're hot, it would fog up and you couldn't see where you were going. I fell down many a time, but that's me crossing one of the streams there in Vietnam while we're out trying to figure out where that road was going to be. Now, everybody in my barracks got up every morning, put on a starched uniform. I mean, starched to the point it would stand up almost and wait for you, and spit shine boots. I would start out that way in the mornings, but when I went out in the field, I came back kind of like this. Now, in our barracks, we had Mama Sons who took care of the barracks, did our laundry and so forth, kept our boots shining, and she hated me because I'd come back looking like this, and the rest of the guys in the barracks would come back with their perfectly starched uniform and spit shine boots, and in my boots, she couldn't hardly tell what the color was. She called me all kinds of names in Vietnamese. I don't know what they were. I don't even want to know what they were, but that's the difference between. And if you look also, you see the rifles locked up in the rifle rack. Those rifles were always kept locked in the rifle rack. If something happened and we needed a rifle, we had to go find the supply sergeant to get a key to unlock the rifle rack. Now, I can tell you, sitting right there out in the open like that, but during the dry season, they had so much red clay all over them, you couldn't even tell what color they were. Now, I went out often, so my rifle was kept clean, but most of the rifles were in that rifle rack, never came out of that rifle rack the entire year they were there. Thank goodness, because I'm not certain how many of them would have fired, even though the M14 was a good weapon. This was not an M16, the one looks like a Mattel toy. This was the M14, the long, big, heavy rifle. But that kind of gives you an idea of engineering there. Now, back out in the jungle, this guy, now, we're trying to pull a 100-foot tape. This guy is walking through the elephant grass. You can, if he weren't blonde, you probably wouldn't even find him. This stuff would cut you all to pieces. You better roll your sleeves down because it was like razors going through there, cut you all up. But trying to pave a road or trying to survey a road to get it paved going through there was interesting. And if you think about it, also somebody shoots at you, how do you know where it came from? He could have been 8 feet from you unless you heard the blast or whatever over the bulldozer or something. You had no idea where it came from. It was nasty stuff. Now, one of the things that I did while I was also there was I did a lot of stuff for the officers and so forth there. This is a headquarters company, 159th Engineer Group Thanksgiving plaque that I made for them. Actually, what it is a piece of cardboard. I took some brown ink and stained it down, and I did the Old English on it, and I did things like I drew pictures of drunk pilgrims and that sort of stuff for the mess hall and for the officers. I did one of the officers, there was almost every week there was an officer rotating back, and they always gave him a great big send-off at the mess hall. Because when you're headquarters company, there's all kinds of brass there. And they gave him a party. Oh, they gave him a party. And he usually got me to do things as pranks or gifts for him. I know one time I did a scroll that was probably 4 foot long in Old English, talking about this colonel that was leaving and so forth. And,
You did this freehand?
uh-huh.
Wow.
That was back when I still had talent. But that was, like I said, it was a piece of cardboard. Now, and the two main engineering units there were the 18th Engineers, and then the group I was with, 20th Engineers. Now, the 18th Engineers were usually in I Corps and 2 Corps. We were down in 3 and 4 Corps. But that was there was some other smaller units there, but almost everybody worked under these two individual units here. And the next one is for all of you who went out there and served as engineers. We look at construction people today, and they're working hard on construction. Not only did you guys out there have to work hard on the construction job you were doing, but you also had to always be vigilant to make sure and ready to grab your weapon and defend yourself and the people around you. So I just want to take this opportunity to say a job well done under unique circumstances. Thank you for your service and welcome home. This kind of gives you a little bit of a brief overview on what the engineers did over there. It was kind of funny when you first got started trying to get all the materials in. Not only were these guys trained as soldiers, but they were trained in the engineering field, the asphalt. You just didn't take every soldier and put them on behind a paving machine. You had to find people who you drafted or joined who were experienced in all these different jobs and so forth. Tying that steel, pouring that concrete, the average soldier wouldn't be able to do that. So you had to have these guys the knowledge and the experience to get out there and do that. Putting all these guys together in one group had to be a challenge into itself. I had some good officers there with me at headquarters company. They were engineers themselves. They had engineering degrees. They had gone to college and got their degrees, and they respected the guys who got out and got in the field, so forth. So, as you look back on the Vietnam and so forth, a lot of the stuff is gone now, been replaced, but some of the old engineering stuff is still there. The Newport Bridge is still there. I don't think it's been blown in the last 40s since the 1975. It probably hasn't had anybody blowing up a section of it and so forth. So hope you enjoyed that show, and I really want to encourage you to tune in for the next 2 shows. I'm always excited when I have these guests come in because I learned a lot, and I've known Barbara for a while, probably close to 20 years. Her story is quite a story. It was written up in the Cary News several years ago. A writer actually got an Emmy for writing it up, or whatever you get. It wasn't a Pulitzer, but it was she got some kind of big award for writing the article about Barbara and Donald. So I know you want to tune in to see her show. And I want you to ask you to encourage anybody out there who has post-traumatic stress, thinks they may have post-traumatic stress, wants to find out more about post-traumatic stress, or a family member of someone with post-traumatic stress, be sure and tune in for this Tears of a Warrior show with the author. This book was actually purchased in bulk by the Order of Purple Hearts, and they have distributed it all across the country to the vet centers. So if you go to a vet center for counseling or whatever, this is the book they give you. It's a fantastic read. I'm going to have them tell you how to get the book, or go by your local vet center and pick them up as long as they last. But it's quite a book. It's his story. She's a psychologist or something along that line, but they're both, she is really great. She just sent me a thing on TED Talk that she had done, talking and so forth, and some of the things that she did, not realizing that it would causing setbacks and so forth with Tony. When you live with someone with post-traumatic stress, you have to be real careful, because the least little thing, a noise, a firecracker, a smell, could all bring them back to a certain day in Vietnam that they're trying to forget. So be sure and tune in. Also, this coming weekend, the North Carolina chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America are having a golf tournament. It's $65 a player. If you have a chance to go to Four Oaks, take part, come in and have lunch with them anyway. I think they're going to have a silent auction, but support these guys, because they're out there going to be doing shows on what is it called? When the politicians go in, town hall, they're having town hall type meetings on post-traumatic stress and Agent Orange. And if you want more about Agent Orange, be sure to go back to some of our previous shows and so forth. We've had some great information come out of Agent Orange, but they're going to be raising money to help put on these Agent Orange and get some of the speakers that can come in and so forth. So that's our shows we got coming up right now.
I have a question.
Okay.
So when you're there,
Okay.
and you're clearing and you're paving and all that, did the military hire locals to work, or it was strictly all American?
Most of it was Americans. They did hire some people, but again, the training, they didn't have the training and so forth. For manual labor, just digging a ditch or something like that, they'd probably hire some of the Vietnamese. But when it come down to the other work, if you notice from the pictures, you didn't see many Vietnamese. The skill work
Right.
was still
That's
done
what I was asking.
by Americans and so forth.
And all the Americans in the crews were actually engineers, or there were some people that were just, okay, you know what, come over, you'll learn what to do.
Yeah, well, I think there was a lot of it was OJT there, just like most of us learned about Vietnam was OJT there, because some of it didn't take the skills, but you had to have a skilled man to show them what to do. Like tying those rebars, that's a time-consuming thing, but you got to know what to do.
Right.
So I'm certain they had people they brought over and were assigned to engineering units to do it. In my particular case, when I came over from engineering school, I was actually interviewed just like a job interview. I went to talk to the captain, and he interviewed me just like I was interviewing for a job. In other words, if I hadn't passed with my experience, I wouldn't have been there doing what I was doing. So they did some OJT, but they also knew what, when people coming in the country, what skills they had, and so forth. And so it was even down to the dump truck drivers. You know, you can take a guy to the field and teach him how to drive a dump truck, but dumping stuff, sometimes if you aren't careful on a dump truck, it'll roll right over with the load if you don't know what you're doing. Everybody learned the skill when they were there, and so forth. But it was interesting to see how the stuff came together. Sometimes it would be delayed for a while because you may be getting too much combat in the area that you couldn't safely do it. It could be that you had to ask permission from the Vietnamese government to do things. We actually bought the land, built them a dog facility for their canine corps, and then turned around and gave it to them. But we had to buy the land from them to do it. So quite often you had to get permission from them, and the paperwork itself could get quite challenging and so forth. But that asphalt plant had, and you didn't have as many asphalt plants, so you had to take those dump trucks full of asphalt sometimes a long way, hauling that asphalt and so forth. Of course, when it's 100 and some degrees, it doesn't cool off as much. But not only the guys doing this work, but just getting the materials there, the steel beams and that sort of stuff. Because none of that was there. It was all had to be brought in from here with ships and so forth. I can imagine just the logistics of getting the building materials site. I know I needed some vellum, which is a type of drafting paper. And my first sergeant, who could come up with anything. And if you asked for it, he'd find it. And he'd come up with a roll of vellum for some special project we were working on. And I don't think there was any vellum in Vietnam, but he found it. But all of this, the materials and the guys, there was I've lost it. It was a book we had one time. Artists, some engineers who were artists, had drew different pictures of what engineers were doing over in Vietnam, and it was phenomenal to look at it. And again, when you look at it, not only are they doing construction work, they also had to be ready. Quite often they pull guard duty at night on the bunkers, and they worked all day. Sometimes they got a hot meal, sometimes it was sea rations. But it was always quite a job, and it was never a cold day. In Vietnam, where we were, it was never a cold day. Well, it did down and get 65 one time. That was pretty cold. I apologize for coughing so much. I don't know where my voice is gone, but I'm going to end it now, and looking forward to seeing you the next show with Barbara Abernathy. Tell all your friends. Be sure to tune in. Anybody that husband that was married when they went to Vietnam or whatever, that would be a great show for them. Again, my name is Bill Dixon here at the international headquarters of Amnon Nissan Communications here in Raleigh, North Carolina at studios, and thank you for joining us. Good night.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Help Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.